The weight of his thoughts was heavier than the gold watch on his wrist as Gabriel Evans sat alone on the park bench. Autumn leaves dancing around his Italian leather shoes in a ballet only nature could choreograph. Despite the spectacular view of the city skyline across the lake, his gaze remained fixed on nothing in particular, his mind a maze of business deals and solitary victories. Gabriel hadn't planned on spending his Tuesday afternoon at Lakeside Park. His schedule, typically packed with meetings and conference calls, had unexpectedly cleared when his acquisition target had requested an additional day to consider his offer. Now, at 34, as the founder and CEO of Evans Technologies with a net worth that newspapers conservatively estimated at $300 million, Gabriel found himself with something he rarely possessed: free time. He loosened his tie slightly, the crisp October air filling his lungs. The park was relatively empty on this weekday afternoon, which suited him perfectly. Solitude had become his companion over the years, a byproduct of his relentless climb to success. "Is this seat taken?" The voice startled him from his thoughts. Gabriel looked up to find a woman gesturing to the empty space beside him on the bench. She was about his age, with chestnut hair tumbling past her shoulders and warm hazel eyes that crinkled slightly at the corners when she smiled. "No, it's free," he replied, shifting slightly to make room even though there was plenty of space. "Thanks," she said, sitting down and placing a worn leather messenger bag at her feet. She wore a simple blue dress under a light jacket, nothing that screamed wealth or status, but carried herself with an easy confidence that Gabriel found himself instantly noticing. They sat in silence for several minutes. Gabriel was acutely aware of her presence beside him, the subtle scent of something floral lavender, perhaps mingling with the autumn air. He'd grown accustomed to people recognizing him, to the shift in their demeanor when they realized who he was. But this woman seemed perfectly content to share the bench without conversation, her eyes taking in the same view he had been ignoring moments before. "It's beautiful, isn't it?" she finally said, her gaze fixed on the water. "The way the buildings reflect in the lake, like two worlds stacked on top of each other." Gabriel followed her line of sight. She was right. The glass skyscrapers mirrored perfectly in the still water, creating an illusion of an inverted city beneath the surface. How had he missed that? "I've never thought of it that way," he admitted. She turned to look at him, a slight smile playing on her lips. "I'm Penelope, by the way. Penelope Adams." "Gabriel Evans," he replied automatically, waiting for the flash of recognition. Instead, she simply nodded. "Nice to meet you, Gabriel." No reaction to his name. It was refreshing and oddly disconcerting at the same time. "Do you come here often?" he asked, immediately regretting how much it sounded like a pickup line. Penelope laughed, a genuine sound that seemed to brighten the already sunny day. "Actually, yes. I teach at the elementary school just down the block. This is my thinking spot during lunch breaks." "You're a teacher?" "Third grade," she confirmed with obvious pride. 7 years and counting." Gabriel nodded, trying to recall the last time he'd had a conversation that wasn't about business, acquisitions, or technology trends. "That must be rewarding." "It is. Exhausting too," Penelope admitted. "But there's nothing quite like watching a child understand something for the first time." She glanced at her watch. "Speaking of which, I should head back. Lunch break's almost over." As she stood to leave, Gabriel felt an unusual impulse. "Do you come here every day?" Penelope paused, studying him with curious eyes. "Most days, weather permitting." "Why?" Gabriel wasn't entirely sure why he'd asked. "Just wondering," he said, trying to sound casual. "Well, maybe I'll see you around, Gabriel Evans," she said with a small wave before walking away, her chestnut hair catching the sunlight. Gabriel watched her go, feeling strangely lighter than he had in months. He told himself it was the unexpected break from his routine, nothing more. Yet the next day, he found himself back at the same bench, at the same time, pretending it was mere coincidence. To his surprise, Penelope appeared right on schedule, her face lighting up with recognition. "Well, look who's here again," she said, taking her place beside him. "Don't tell me you're playing hooky from work 2 days in a row?" Gabriel smiled despite himself. "I own the company, so technically, I'm still on the clock." "Oh? What company would that be?" she asked, unpacking a simple lunch from her bag, a sandwich, an apple, and what looked like homemade cookies. "Evans Technologies," he replied, watching her face for the usual reaction. Penelope paused mid-bite. "Wait, the software company? The one with that virtual reality platform?" "That's the one," Gabriel confirmed, preparing for the conversation to shift as it inevitably did to questions about his wealth, his business, his success. Instead, Penelope laughed. "No wonder you can afford to sit in parks in the middle of a workday." She held out her container of cookies. "Cookie? My grandmother's recipe. I stress bake on Sundays." Gabriel stared at the offered container for a moment before taking one. "Thanks," he said, genuinely touched by the simple gesture. The cookie was excellent chocolate chip with something else. "Is that cinnamon?" "Good palate." Penelope nodded approvingly. Most people can't pick that out. They fell into easy conversation as Penelope ate her lunch. She asked intelligent questions about his company but seemed more interested in how the technology worked than in his business success. Gabriel found himself explaining complex technical concepts in ways he hadn't since his early startup days, before PR teams and technical writers sanitized everything for mass consumption. So, it's essentially creating neural pathways without actually rewiring the brain, Penelope summarized after he explained their latest project, a learning platform for children with processing disorders. "Exactly," Gabriel said, impressed. "You understand this stuff better than some of my developers." "I teach 8-year-olds," she reminded him with a grin. "If I can explain continental drift to kids who still eat paste occasionally, I can grasp virtual neural mapping." She checked her watch again. "And that's my cue. Back to the young minds of America." "Same time tomorrow?" Gabriel asked before he could stop himself. Penelope tilted her head, studying him with those perceptive hazel eyes. "You planning on making this a habit, Mr. Evans?" "Maybe," he admitted. "It's nice talking to someone who isn't trying to sell me something or get something from me." A softer expression crossed her face. "Must be lonely at the top." The observation, delivered without pity or judgment, hit closer to home than Gabriel expected. "Sometimes," he acknowledged. "Well, in that case, I'll see you tomorrow," Penelope said. "I'll bring extra cookies." True to her word, Penelope returned the next day, and the day after that. Their lunch meetings became a highlight in Gabriel's otherwise predictable routine. He found himself rearranging meetings and conference calls to ensure he could make it to the park by noon. His executive assistant, Maria, had given him curious looks when he blocked off the same hour every day on his calendar, but she'd asked no questions. After 2 weeks of these daily encounters, Gabriel realized he knew more about Penelope than he'd known about anyone in years. He knew she had a younger brother who worked as a paramedic in Chicago. He knew her favorite book was The Secret Garden, a copy of which she'd received from her late father when she was 9. He knew she volunteered at an animal shelter on weekends and could do a surprisingly accurate impression of her school's principal. What he didn't know was why he found himself thinking about her during board meetings, or why he'd caught himself smiling at random moments throughout his day. On a particularly crisp Friday in early November, Gabriel arrived at their bench to find it empty. He checked his watch 12:05. Penelope was usually punctual to a fault. He sat down, telling himself she was probably just running late, grading papers or dealing with a student issue. By 12:20, he'd checked his email 3 times and was considering leaving when he spotted her hurrying down the path, her cheeks flushed from exertion. "I'm so sorry," she said breathlessly. dropping onto the bench beside him. Parent-teacher conference ran long. Mrs. Henderson has very specific concerns about her son's penmanship. Gabriel felt a rush of relief that surprised him with its intensity. I was starting to think you weren't coming. And miss our daily chat? Not a chance. She pulled out her lunch and then paused, looking at him more carefully. You know, in the 3 weeks we've been meeting here, I've never seen you eat lunch. Gabriel shrugged. I usually grab something back at the office. That's not very efficient for a tech genius, she teased. Tell you what, I'm free this weekend. Why don't we have a proper meal for once? There's a great little Italian place just outside the park. The invitation caught Gabriel off guard. Their friendship, he corrected mentally, had existed entirely within the boundaries of this park bench and their lunch hour. Expanding it felt significant in a way he couldn't quite articulate. Unless you're busy, Penelope added when he didn't immediately respond. I'm sure millionaire CEOs have packed social calendars. No, I'd like that, Gabriel said quickly. Saturday lunch? Penelope smiled, and Gabriel felt that now familiar warmth spread through his chest. It's a date, she said, then seemed to catch herself. I mean, not a date, just a food appointment between bench friends. Bench friends, Gabriel repeated with a laugh. I like that. They exchanged phone numbers another first and agreed to meet at the restaurant at 1 o'clock on Saturday. As Gabriel walked back to his office building afterward, he realized he was actually looking forward to the weekend for the first time in years. Saturday arrived with unexpected nerves. Gabriel, who regularly negotiated multi-million-dollar deals without breaking a sweat, found himself changing his shirt twice before settling on a casual navy button-down and jeans. He arrived 15 minutes early and waited outside the restaurant, a charming hole-in-the-wall place called Martello's. Penelope appeared right on time, wearing a simple green dress that made her hazel eyes seem even more vibrant. Her hair was loose around her shoulders, catching the afternoon sunlight in a way that momentarily distracted Gabriel. You clean up nice, she said with a smile. Almost didn't recognize you without the power suit. I do own casual clothes, Gabriel replied, returning her smile. Contrary to popular belief, I don't sleep in a tie. Lunch stretched into nearly 3 hours of conversation. Away from the constraints of her lunch break, Penelope was even more animated, gesturing enthusiastically as she told stories about her students' antics. Gabriel found himself laughing more than he had in months, possibly years. So this kid Ethan, he looks me dead in the eye and says, Ms. Adams, I put the class hamster in my desk because he told me he was cold. Penelope recounted, eyes bright with amusement. With complete conviction, like he and Mr. Whiskers had a heart-to-heart conversation about climate preferences. Gabriel chuckled. And what did you say to that? I told him that next time Mr. Whiskers complains about the temperature, he should come to me first because hamsters are notoriously overdramatic. The restaurant had nearly emptied around them, the lunch crowd long gone, when Gabriel finally glanced at his watch. I had no idea it was so late, he said, surprised to find it was past 4. Time flies when you're hearing about the dramatic lives of third graders, Penelope said with a smile. She hesitated for a moment, then added, I'm glad we did this. It's nice to talk without watching the clock. It is, Gabriel agreed. He paid the bill despite Penelope's protests, and they walked outside into the late afternoon sunshine. Can I walk you home? Penelope looked pleasantly surprised by the offer. It's about 15 minutes from here. You sure you don't need to get back to your tech empire? The empire can wait, Gabriel said, finding he truly meant it. They walked through the park where they'd first met, the autumn colors now at their peak. Penelope lived in a modest but charming apartment building a few blocks from her school. At her door, there was a moment of awkward hesitation. I had a really good time today, Penelope said, keys in hand but making no move to use them. So did I, Gabriel replied, suddenly aware of how close they were standing. "We should do it again sometime." "I'd like that." Penelope looked up at him, a question in her eyes that made his heart race unexpectedly. Before Gabriel could overthink it, he leaned down and kissed her softly. It was brief, gentle, but when he pulled back, something had shifted between them, a line crossed that neither had explicitly acknowledged until now. Penelope smiled, a slight blush coloring her cheeks. "I'll see you Monday at our bench." "I'll be there," Gabriel promised. He walked back to where his driver waited with a lightness in his step that felt foreign yet welcome. For the first time in longer than he could remember, Gabriel Evans wasn't thinking about stock prices, market share, or his next acquisition. He was simply thinking about Monday and seeing Penelope again. Monday's lunch meeting had a different energy. Their conversation flowed as easily as ever, but there was an undercurrent of anticipation, a new awareness of each other. When Penelope's hand brushed against his as she offered him a cookie, Gabriel caught it gently in his own, interlacing their fingers. Her smile told him everything he needed to know. Over the next few weeks, their relationship evolved beyond the park bench. They had dinner at upscale restaurants where Gabriel was recognized and treated with deference, which seemed to amuse Penelope. They spent a Sunday afternoon at the art museum, where Penelope's genuine enthusiasm for the exhibits was refreshing compared to the performative appreciation Gabriel was used to from business associates. "You know, I've never actually been to your office," Penelope mentioned one evening as they walked along the lakefront after dinner. "Is it as impressive as the Evans Technologies website makes it look? All glass and chrome and people doing important things on transparent screens?" Gabriel laughed. "The marketing team may have embellished a bit, but it is pretty nice. Would you like to see it?" "Is that allowed? Won't your security team tackle me for being an unauthorized civilian?" "I think I can get you a visitor pass," Gabriel said dryly. "I know a guy in management." The next day, Gabriel gave Penelope a tour of the Evans Technologies headquarters, a sleek 20-story building in the heart of downtown. Employees did double takes as he led her through the various departments, unaccustomed to seeing their normally reserved CEO smiling and introducing someone who was clearly not a business associate. In his spacious corner office on the top floor, Penelope wandered to the floor-to-ceiling windows, taking in the panoramic view of the city. "Now I see why you're so successful," she said, turning back to him. "With a view like this, who wouldn't be inspired?" "It's just a room," Gabriel replied, watching her. "But I'll admit, it does have its perks." Penelope approached his desk, picking up a small frame he kept there, a photo of his parents from years ago. "You have her smile," she observed, referring to his mother. "Same crinkle at the corners." Gabriel was struck by the observation. No one had ever commented on that before. "They passed away when I was in college," he said quietly. "Car accident." Penelope set the photo down gently. "I'm sorry, Gabriel. Is that why you threw yourself into building the company?" "Partly," he acknowledged. "It was their dream, too. My father was a software engineer, ahead of his time, really. We'd talk about starting something together after I graduated." He paused, surprised at how easily the words were coming. He rarely spoke about his parents. "After they died, it became my way of keeping them with me, I guess." Penelope crossed to where he stood and took his hand. "They'd be proud of what you've built." "I hope so," Gabriel said, squeezing her hand gently. When Maria knocked to remind him about his 3 p.m. meeting, Gabriel made a split-second decision. "Cancel it," he told her, much to his assistant's visible surprise. "Reschedule for tomorrow." "But sir, the Jensen team flew in specifically for—" "Tomorrow, Maria. First thing." His tone was firm, but not unkind. "Ms. Adams and I have plans this afternoon." After Maria left, looking bewildered, Penelope raised an eyebrow. "We have plans?" "We do now," Gabriel said with a smile. How do you feel about playing hooky for the afternoon? Penelope's eyes lit up. Ms. Hamilton has my class for art anyway. Where are we going? It's a surprise. The surprise turned out to be a helicopter ride over the city, something Gabriel occasionally used for business but had never considered for pleasure. Penelope's delight as they soared over landmarks and neighborhoods made Gabriel see his city through new eyes. Her excitement when they touched down on his rarely used country property an hour outside the city was equally rewarding. You own this? She gasped, taking in the sprawling lakeside retreat with its massive windows and wraparound deck. And you never come here? Not as often as I should, Gabriel admitted, leading her inside. The house was immaculately maintained, thanks to a staff that kept it ready for use even when he was absent for months at a time. I bought it 3 years ago, thinking it would be a good place to decompress, but you never decompress, Penelope finished for him, wandering through the open concept living area. Gabriel, this place is incredible, and you're telling me it just sits here empty most of the time? There was no judgment in her voice, just genuine curiosity. Gabriel found himself seeing the property through her eyes not as an investment or status symbol, but as a beautiful home, going unloved. I'm not very good at downtime, he admitted. Never have been. Even as a kid, I was always working on some project or another. Penelope kicked off her shoes and curled up on the massive sofa facing the lake view. Well, consider this your first lesson in the art of relaxation. They spent the afternoon and evening at the lake house, ordering takeout from a local restaurant that delivered to the gate. Gabriel showed Penelope his rarely used woodworking shop in the basement, a hobby he'd inherited from his father, but barely practiced anymore. They walked along the private shoreline as the sun set, talking about everything and nothing. When it grew too cold to remain outside, they returned to the house, where Gabriel built a fire in the massive stone fireplace. They sat before it, Penelope leaning against him, his arm around her shoulders in comfortable silence. Thank you for today, she said softly, for sharing this place with me, for the helicopter ride, for canceling your important meeting. Gabriel pressed a kiss to the top of her head. Believe it or not, I should be thanking you. I can't remember the last time I enjoyed a day this much. Penelope tilted her face up to his. We should do this more often then. We should, he agreed, before capturing her lips in a kiss that quickly deepened, expressing the feelings that had been building between them for weeks. Later, as they lay tangled together in the master bedroom, Penelope's head resting on his chest, Gabriel felt a contentment he couldn't recall experiencing before. The constant mental noise of business concerns and strategic planning had quieted, replaced by the simple pleasure of being with someone who saw him as more than his success. What are you thinking about? Penelope murmured, her fingers tracing patterns on his skin. Gabriel considered the question. That I'm glad you sat down next to me that day in the park. She propped herself up to look at him, her hair falling around them like a curtain. Me too, she said with a smile that made his heart stutter. Although I had no idea I was sitting next to a millionaire. You should wear a name tag or something. Gabriel laughed, pulling her close again. Would it have mattered if you'd known? Penelope pretended to consider this. Well, I might have asked for a cookie in return. Those things aren't cheap to make, you know. As winter descended on the city, Gabriel and Penelope's relationship continued to deepen. They still met at their park bench when weather permitted, a tradition neither wanted to abandon, but their time together expanded far beyond those lunch hours. Gabriel found himself making more time for life outside work. He delegated tasks he would have previously insisted on handling himself. He left the office at reasonable hours more often than not. His executive team noticed the change, but wisely made no comment beyond Maria's occasional knowing smile when he blocked off personal time in his calendar. For her part, Penelope took Gabriel's wealth and status in stride. She was neither intimidated by it nor particularly impressed, treating his penthouse apartment with the same comfortable familiarity she showed her own modest space. When they attended high-profile events together and she was introduced as Gabriel Evans' girlfriend, she charmed his business associates with her genuine warmth and quick wit. "Your Ms. Adams is quite refreshing," commented Victor Chen, one of Gabriel's longest-standing investors, at a charity gala in December. "Where on earth did you find her?" "On a park bench," Gabriel replied truthfully, watching as Penelope engaged in animated conversation with the wife of the city's mayor across the room. Victor laughed, assuming it was a joke. "Well, wherever you met, she's good for you. I haven't seen you this relaxed in years." The observation struck Gabriel as profoundly true. Penelope had brought balance to his life that he hadn't realized was missing. With her, he remembered there was more to living than quarterly earnings and market expansion. Not that their relationship was without challenges. Penelope was fiercely independent and occasionally bristled at what she perceived as Gabriel's tendency to solve problems by throwing money at them. Their first significant argument came when Gabriel, upon learning that Penelope's apartment building was having heating issues during a particularly brutal cold snap, offered to put her up in a luxury hotel until it was fixed. "I don't need you to rescue me, Gabriel," she'd said, her voice tight with frustration. "I've been handling these things on my own for years." "I know you can handle it," he'd countered. "But why should you have to when there's an easy solution?" "Because it's my life. My problem to solve," Penelope had exclaimed. "Do you have any idea how it feels to have someone just wave a magic money wand and make everything better? It's like you don't think I'm capable." The argument had caught Gabriel completely off guard. In his world, resources existed to be used, and it seemed foolish not to use them when needed. It had taken several long conversations for him to understand that for Penelope, maintaining her independence was a matter of self-respect, not stubbornness. They reached a compromise. Penelope stayed with Gabriel during the worst of the cold spell, but she insisted on contributing by cooking meals and, to his initial discomfort, paying for groceries. "Relationships are partnerships," she'd explained while forcibly handing him cash for the food delivery. "Even when one partner happens to be obscenely wealthy." By the time Christmas approached, they had found their rhythm. Gabriel surprised Penelope by accompanying her to her school's holiday concert, sitting among parents and grandparents as her class performed a somewhat chaotic rendition of Jingle Bells with homemade instruments. "Mr. Evans, would you sign my program?" asked a small boy with missing front teeth after the show. "My dad says you're the richest person in the whole city, and you make the computers talk to each other." Gabriel smiled, signing the crumpled paper. "Your dad's only half right. The computers don't talk, they just share information really fast." "That's talking," the boy insisted. "Miss Adams says communication comes in lots of different forms." Gabriel glanced at Penelope, who was watching the exchange with obvious amusement. "Ms. Adams is very wise," he agreed. For Christmas, Gabriel had agonized over what to get Penelope. She had made it clear early in their relationship that extravagant gifts made her uncomfortable, which eliminated most of his usual go-to presents. In the end, he'd commissioned a local artisan to create a miniature replica of their park bench, complete with tiny versions of them sitting side by side. It came with a small plaque that read simply, "Where it all began." Penelope's eyes had filled with tears when she opened it. "It's perfect," she whispered, tracing the detailed figures with her fingertip. "Absolutely perfect." Her gift to him was equally thoughtful, a handmade cookbook filled with recipes they'd enjoyed together, including her grandmother's famous chocolate chip cookies, along with a promise to teach him how to make each one. "So you'll never go hungry even when I'm not around," she'd explained. As they rang in the new year together at Gabriel's penthouse, watching fireworks explode over the city from his private terrace, Gabriel realized with startling clarity that his life had fundamentally changed in the few months since Penelope had sat down beside him in the park. "What are you thinking about?" Penelope asked, echoing the question she'd asked that first night at the lake house. She was wrapped in his arms, a champagne flute in her hand, her face illuminated by the colorful bursts overhead. Gabriel tightened his arms around her. "I'm thinking that I love you," he said, the words coming easily despite it being the first time he'd said them aloud. Penelope turned in his embrace to face him, her eyes shining. "I love you too," she replied without hesitation. Their kiss, set against the backdrop of celebration echoing across the city, felt like a promise of more shared moments, more growth, more love. As winter gradually yielded to spring, Gabriel and Penelope settled into what felt like a new phase of their relationship. They didn't officially live together, but Penelope spent most weekends at either Gabriel's penthouse or the lake house, which they now visited regularly. Gabriel had a toothbrush and a drawer of clothes at her apartment, and her influence was evident in his space's colorful throw pillows on his once minimalist furniture. Framed photos where there had been abstract art, actual food in his refrigerator instead of just takeout containers. One particularly beautiful April evening, they were having dinner on the terrace of a restaurant overlooking the park where they'd met. The trees were just beginning to bud, and the first spring flowers dotted the landscape below. "I can see our bench from here," Penelope noted, pointing to the familiar spot by the lake. "It looks so small from up here." Gabriel followed her gaze. "Small, but significant," he replied. He reached across the table to take her hand. "You know, before I met you, I thought I had everything figured out. Success was measurable market share, profit margins, expansion rates. Very sexy metrics," Penelope teased gently. "Aren't they, though?" Gabriel smiled. "But sitting there every day, having lunch with you, I started to realize how narrow my definition of success had become. How empty." Penelope squeezed his hand. "You've built amazing things, Gabriel. Don't discount that." "I'm not," he assured her. "But without someone to share it with, what's the point?" My parents understood that. They worked hard, but they always made time for each other. For me. He paused, gathering his thoughts. "Meeting you. It was like being reminded of what actually matters." "That's quite a burden to put on a random woman who just wanted a place to eat her sandwich," Penelope said lightly, though her eyes were soft with emotion. "You were never random," Gabriel said seriously. "Sometimes I think, it sounds crazy, but sometimes I think I was meant to be on that bench that day, that everything in my life was leading to that moment." Penelope's eyes widened slightly. "Gabriel Evans, are you getting philosophical on me? Who are you, and what have you done with my pragmatic CEO?" Gabriel laughed, but there was nervousness behind it that Penelope clearly detected, her expression shifting to one of curious concern. "What is it?" she asked. "You're being very intense right now." "Am I?" Gabriel took a deep breath. "I guess I am. Because I've been thinking about what matters, about the future, about us." He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small velvet box, placing it on the table between them. "I had this whole elaborate plan involving the actual bench and possibly violating several park regulations, but seeing it from here just now, it felt right to do it now." Penelope stared at the box, her lips parting in surprise. "I love you, Penelope," Gabriel said, his voice steady despite the pounding of his heart. "You've changed my life in ways I never expected. You challenge me, you ground me, you make me laugh. Will you marry me?" He opened the box to reveal a ring elegant but not ostentatious, with a center diamond flanked by smaller stones in a vintage-inspired setting. He'd chosen it knowing Penelope would appreciate its understated beauty more than something flashy. Penelope's eyes filled with tears as she looked from the ring to Gabriel's face. For a heart-stopping moment, He thought she might say no. Then a radiant smile broke across her features. "Yes," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "Yes, I will marry you, Gabriel Evans." Gabriel slipped the ring onto her finger, his own hands trembling slightly with relief and joy. Around them, other diners who had witnessed the proposal broke into applause, but Gabriel barely heard them. All he could focus on was Penelope's smile, the feel of her hand in his, the promise of their future together. Later that night, as they lay together in Gabriel's bed, their bed, as he'd come to think of it, Penelope held her hand up, watching the ring catch the soft light from the bedside lamp. "It's beautiful," she said softly. "Perfect, actually." "I was worried you might think it was too much," Gabriel admitted, propping himself up on one elbow to look at her. Penelope shook her head. "It's exactly right. Like you somehow knew exactly what I would have chosen." "I may have enlisted your friend Megan for advice," Gabriel confessed. "She was surprisingly good at keeping the secret." "Megan knew?" Penelope gasped, swatting his arm playfully. "That traitor. No wonder she's been acting weird every time we've talked about you lately." Gabriel caught her hand and kissed her palm. "So, future Mrs. Evans, when should we do this thing? Summer wedding? Fall? Next spring?" Penelope's expression grew thoughtful. "Actually, I've been thinking, would it be completely crazy to consider a smaller wedding? Soon." "How soon is soon?" Gabriel asked, surprised but not opposed to the idea. "Like, a month or two?" Penelope bit her lip. "I know it sounds rushed, but I don't need some enormous production. Just us, our closest friends and family. Somewhere beautiful." She paused. "Maybe the lake house?" Gabriel considered this. He'd always assumed his wedding would be a major social event, more for business connections than personal preference. But the idea of a simple, intimate ceremony at their special place, it felt right. "I think that sounds perfect," he said. "And for what it's worth, I'd marry you tomorrow if we could." Penelope's smile was radiant. "Let's compromise. Give me 8 weeks to plan something small, but special." "Deal," Gabriel agreed, sealing it with a kiss that quickly deepened into something more. The engagement announcement in the business section of the city paper the next day caused quite a stir in Gabriel's professional circles. The article, accompanied by a file photo of Gabriel and a more recent one of Penelope from a charity event, noted the unlikely meeting in Lakeside Park and described Penelope as an elementary school teacher who has evidently captured the heart of one of the city's most eligible bachelors. Gabriel's phone buzzed constantly with messages of congratulations, some sincere, others thinly veiling surprise or curiosity. Victor Chen sent an extravagant arrangement of flowers to Gabriel's office with a note that simply read, "The park bench story was true. I'll be damned." Penelope received her own share of attention. Her colleagues threw an impromptu celebration in the teacher's lounge, complete with a cake hastily decorated with "Congratulations, Mesquite Adams," in wobbly blue icing. Her third graders were even more excited when they noticed the ring, peppering her with questions about whether she was going to be rich now and if she would still be their teacher. "Of course I'll still be your teacher," she assured them. "Getting married doesn't change who I am or what I love doing." True to her word, Penelope approached wedding planning with the same practical efficiency she brought to her classroom. She enlisted Megan's help for certain details but kept the event deliberately small and manageable. Gabriel offered the services of his company's events team, which Penelope politely but firmly declined. "I appreciate it," she told him, "but I want this to be ours, not Evans Technology's latest product launch." Instead, they worked together in the evenings and on weekends, making decisions about flowers, food, and music as a team. Gabriel discovered he had stronger opinions about wedding details than he'd expected, particularly regarding the menu and the ceremony location on the property. "The point is," Penelope explained one evening as they debated the merits of different ceremony spots. That it should feel meaningful to both of us, not just convenient or pretty. They eventually settled on a location overlooking the lake, where a natural clearing in the trees created a perfect view of the water. For the reception, they would use the sprawling deck and great room of the house, with doors thrown open to create an indoor-outdoor flow. 6 weeks after the proposal, on a perfect June day with clear skies and a gentle breeze, Gabriel stood waiting in that clearing as 50 of their closest friends and family gathered on either side of a simple aisle marked by flower petals. His brother Patrick stood beside him as best man, offering quiet encouragement as Gabriel's nerves intensified. "She'll be here," Patrick assured him, straightening Gabriel's tie for the third time. "And judging by the way she looks at you, she can't wait to marry you." When the string quartet began playing, Gabriel's breath caught in his throat. Penelope appeared at the end of the aisle, escorted by her beaming brother. Her dress was simple and elegant, flowing around her as she walked, her hair adorned with small white flowers instead of a veil. But it was her smile, radiant and full of promise, that Gabriel would remember most clearly from that moment. As she reached him and took his hands, Gabriel felt a sense of rightness so profound it nearly overwhelmed him. This woman, who had sat beside him on a park bench and seen past his wealth to the person beneath, was choosing to build a life with him. The ceremony was brief, but heartfelt. They exchanged vows they had written themselves, promises not just of love but of partnership, support, and growth together. When Gabriel slipped the wedding band onto Penelope's finger to join her engagement ring, his hands were steady, his purpose clear. "By the power vested in me," the officiant, a longtime friend of Penelope's family, concluded, "I now pronounce you husband and wife. Gabriel, you may kiss your bride." The kiss they shared was both a culmination and a beginning, witnessed by those who mattered most to them. As applause erupted around them, Gabriel whispered against Penelope's lips, "I love you, Mrs. Evans." "I love you too," she whispered back. "Even though I'm keeping Adams professionally, the kids would be so confused." Gabriel laughed, taking her hand as they turned to face their guests as a married couple for the first time. The reception that followed was everything they had hoped for: joyful, relaxed, and deeply personal. They danced under string lights on the deck as the sun set over the lake. They cut a cake that Penelope's grandmother had insisted on baking herself. They listened to heartfelt toasts from Patrick and Megan, who recounted the story of how Penelope had called her in a panic after first realizing she might be falling for the hot guy on the bench. Later, as evening deepened and guests continued celebrating, Gabriel and Penelope slipped away to the end of the private dock, looking out over the moonlit water. "Happy?" Gabriel asked, his arm around his new wife's waist. "Incredibly," Penelope confirmed, leaning into him. "Although I have a confession to make." Gabriel raised an eyebrow. "Should I be worried?" "That depends," Penelope said with a mischievous smile. "How do you feel about the fact that I actually recognized you that very first day in the park?" "What?" Gabriel turned to face her fully. "You knew who I was?" Penelope nodded, looking slightly guilty but mostly amused. "Your face had been on the cover of Business Monthly the week before. I had just read an article about you while waiting at the dentist." "So all this time," Gabriel began, trying to process this new information. "I wasn't completely clueless," Penelope admitted. "But in my defense, I really did just want somewhere to eat my lunch. The bench was convenient. And then, you looked so alone, despite everything you've accomplished. I was curious." "You never said anything," Gabriel marveled. "Why?" "Because the moment we started talking, it didn't matter," Penelope said simply. "You weren't Gabriel Evans, tech millionaire. You were just a thoughtful guy sharing a bench, seeing the world a little differently than I did." That's who I fell in love with. Gabriel shook his head in amazement, then began to laugh. All this time, I thought I was the one with the secret identity. Don't worry. Your reputation as the mysterious bench millionaire remains intact, Penelope assured him, rising on tiptoes to kiss him softly. Now, should we get back to our wedding? I believe you promised me a proper honeymoon afterward, and I intend to collect. As they walked back toward the celebration hand in hand, Gabriel reflected on the incredible journey that had brought them to this point. From a chance meeting on a park bench to building a life together, it seemed both impossible and inevitable at the same time. The months following their wedding were a time of adjustment and joy as they navigated the realities of married life. They decided to make Gabriel's penthouse their primary residence, but kept Penelope's apartment as a convenient place for her to stay on school nights when she had early meetings or late events. The lake house became their weekend retreat, a place where both could truly relax away from the demands of their respective careers. Gabriel continued to evolve as both a businessman and a partner. With Penelope's encouragement, he implemented more family-friendly policies at Evans Technologies, including expanded parental leave and flexible scheduling options. He delegated more responsibility to his capable executive team, allowing himself time to pursue personal interests again, including resuming the woodworking hobby he had neglected for so long. Penelope thrived in her teaching career, bringing fresh enthusiasm to her classroom. She used her new platform as Gabriel Evans's wife sparingly but effectively, helping to establish a foundation that provided technology and resources to underfunded schools throughout the city. Together, they became a formidable team, each supporting the other's goals while building something new between them. They still met occasionally at their park bench, a tradition they refused to abandon no matter how busy life became. On their first anniversary, Gabriel surprised Penelope with the engraved plaque that had been officially installed on their bench, reading, "Where two worlds met and became one, GE and PA, forever grateful." When Penelope saw it, she laughed through happy tears. "You actually got permission this time instead of bribing a park official?" "Completely legitimate," Gabriel confirmed, "though I may have made a sizable donation to the Parks Department's education program." 6 months later, on a snowy December evening as they decorated their Christmas tree, Penelope turned to Gabriel with a mysterious smile. "I have an early gift for you," she said, handing him a small package wrapped in silver paper. Gabriel unwrapped it carefully to find a tiny pair of baby shoes nestled in tissue paper. He stared at them for a long moment before understanding dawned, his eyes flying to Penelope's face. "Are you—" Penelope nodded, her eyes shining. 12 weeks. Due in June, right around our second anniversary." Gabriel whooped with joy, lifting Penelope and spinning her around before setting her down quickly. "Sorry, should I not do that? Are you okay? Do you need to sit down?" Penelope laughed, the sound Gabriel had fallen in love with on that park bench over 2 years ago. "I'm pregnant, not made of glass. But yes, let's sit. I have ultrasound pictures to show you." As they curled up together on the sofa, looking at the first images of their child, Gabriel felt a profound sense of completion. The success he had chased for so long had been hollow without someone to share it with. Now, with Penelope beside him and their family growing, he understood what true wealth meant. "What are you thinking?" Penelope asked softly, noticing his thoughtful expression. Gabriel smiled, pressing a kiss to her temple. "I'm thinking about how one random Tuesday afternoon changed everything. How sitting in silence on that park bench led me to the greatest joy I've ever known." "Not so random," Penelope reminded him, placing his hand over her still flat stomach. "Remember? It was meant to be." "It was," Gabriel agreed, marveling at how the universe had conspired to bring them together, a millionaire seeking solitude and a teacher looking for a place to eat her lunch, finding in each other exactly what they hadn't known they needed. Outside their window, snow began to fall, covering the city in a blanket of white. Inside, warmed by love and the promise of the future, Gabriel and Penelope continued writing their unexpected love story, one that had begun with two strangers on a park bench and would now extend into generations to come.